Hello and welcome to WION World is One. My name is Sumit Chaturvedi. Today is a big day, the day of budget for India, from survival to revival. After many budgets have been announced, today is the day when the real annual budget will be announced. Joining me is my colleague Priyanka Sharma. Priyanka, over to you for the headlines.
Yes, absolutely. It is a big day for India indeed, when Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman will be unveiling the budget shortly, and we of course will track all the highlights and the outcomes of the budget. For now, let's take a look at the headlines we're tracking at this hour. India's Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman is all set to present the Union Budget 2021-22 today. This budget assumes significance as it comes amid the coronavirus pandemic, with hopes that it will help to revitalize the economy. The Myanmar military stages a coup in the country and takes control of the country for 1 year, declaring a state of emergency. Earlier, Myanmar's military detained the country's de facto leader, Aung San Suu Kyi, and the country's president. The dramatic escalation came after weeks of rising tensions between the military and the civilian government over allegations of fraud in the November election. The United States urges Myanmar's military to release detained officials and warns of a stern response over the military coup. Australia too condemns the Myanmar military action and says that it must release the elected leaders immediately. Myanmar's military rebukes foreign embassies and denies impeding transition. In a massive clampdown on protests demanding the release of jailed Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny, the police in Russia detained more than 5,000 people. This as thousands of protesters defied government warnings to rally from Vladivostok to St. Petersburg in a second weekend of mass demonstrations over the arrest of Navalny. A suspected suicide car bomb in Somalia's capital, followed by a shootout between militants and security forces at a hotel, causes an unknown number of casualties. The militant Islamist group Al-Shabaab, which is linked to Al-Qaeda, has claimed responsibility through its radio station. And the European Union announces progress in its battle to get the vaccine doses promised by the drugs manufacturers, as AstraZeneca now says that it will increase its coronavirus vaccine deliveries to the EU by 30%. The British-Swedish company had earlier backtracked on its original plan and said that it could deliver only a quarter of the doses originally promised to the bloc. A big day for India indeed. The Indian Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman is about to unveil the first ever digital-only budget for the financial year 2021-22. And this year's Union budget assumes special significance in the wake of the coronavirus crisis, of course. Today's will be a budget of many firsts. The first time in the history of independent India that the budget papers will not be printed. The Finance Ministry has decided not to print the budget documents in physical form, this time around amid the pandemic scare. It will be digitally most accessible of a union budget of all time, available online on the Union Budget mobile app. As Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government tries to bring the country's economy back on track, the government has promised a game-changer of sorts of plans to boost economic growth. For an economy facing its worst contraction in decades, the recovery of demand should remain a key focus to reclaim economic recovery. The Finance Minister will also have to revive declining revenues and restore millions of jobs lost during the crisis and the lockdown earlier last year. Amid the massive health crisis, the healthcare sector also merits special attention, and looking to fix the shortcomings exposed by the pandemic, the government may expand the Ayushman Bharat initiative, and experts are hopeful of healthcare spending being doubled in the next fiscal year. The total expenditure in the healthcare sector might also be raised to 4% of gross domestic output in the coming 4 years. A dedicated health fund could also be set up as part of the plan, while the government could also increase the health tax to fund the new program. The Reserve Bank of India is now expecting a sharp rise in bad loans in the banking system due to the pandemic, and creation of a bad bank could finally be announced by the government. The move will aim to boost lending and improve the valuation of state-run banks before selling stakes in them, where bad assets of state-run banks could be parked and later sold at a discounted price in the market. India has also set a target of building infrastructure worth trillions, which will be implemented as part of the government's spending push in the infrastructure sector. But given the revenue constraints and strained banks' loan books, funding the infrastructure projects may prove to be a challenge. And hence, experts believe that Sitharaman may also announce a dedicated development financial institution to facilitate financing greenfield infrastructure projects. Industry experts are expecting more measures for the ruling government's flagship Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan. India is also considering hiking import duties by 5 to 10% on more than 50 items, including smartphones, electronic components and appliances. The move to increase import duties is part of Modi's Self-Reliant India campaign that aims to promote and support domestic manufacturing. A further impetus to the Make in India program is also likely.
And today we are joined by Mr. Shashank Srivastava. He is ED of Maruti Suzuki, India's largest car maker, to talk on his expectations from the budget. Good morning to Mr. Srivastava. First of all, well, your industry that contributes to 50% of the manufacturing for overall India. What is your expectation how Indian government is going to give any sop to this industry or not?
Yes, so as you know, the automobile industry post the pandemic has bounced back. We have seen a continuous month-on-month growth, which is a very positive sign. However, when we compare it with the year previous to last one, then it is still way off, is almost 30% of those peaks. And therefore, the industry would expect some sort of support for the long-term future. And I think there are a couple of actions which the government can do. So when there was a drop in demand, as I just said, 33% off the highs even today, it was largely because of the cost of acquisition, and the industry has been asking government to somehow help on bringing the cost of acquisition down, which means that either a GST reduction or a tax reduction in form of insurance or road tax or registration tax, etc. But I think the government has this particular year has a lot of expenditure to be done on the social sector, as also, there are fiscal constraints. So I am not really expecting cuts in GST. However, the government can, on the demand side, build something for the auto industry, like a scrappage policy, which everybody has been talking about, which should help in spurring the demand and also reducing the polluting vehicles on the road, and thereby saving on the oil fuel imports as well. So I think a couple of things which the government can do, and out of the box thinking, if somebody might think from the demand perspective, maybe allowing the interest on car loans to be deductible for the purpose of income tax calculation, as also depreciation being allowed to the private consumers as well, and the accelerated depreciation which was being allowed for the corporates to continue.
And other green cars and two-wheelers, it is promoted.
Everybody agrees is finally going to be, both from the perspective of running cost as also from the environment perspective, adopted in a large way going forward. But right at the moment, there are constraints for the EVs to actually grow in markets, not only in India, but across the world. The cost of acquisition for the battery-powered vehicles is extremely high, as also the charging infrastructure is very limited in India, and there is the range anxiety from the consumer's perspective. So I think if the best way to go forward is through the support to be given to alternate fuel technologies like CNG, and also to the hybrid technology, because hybrid powertrains and the EV powertrains have a lot of common component. So you do require a lot of volumes to build the localization, which would ultimately bring the cost of EVs down. So I would expect some support in the form of some subsidy for the hybrid vehicles, as also for the alternate fuel vehicles like the CNG.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Srivastava, for joining us this morning. Over to you, Priyanka.
All right, thank you, Sumit. Now we have another guest joining us on this broadcast to decode the budget and its expectations. Joining us live from Mumbai is now Andrew Holland, the CEO of Avendus Capital. Andrew, welcome to WION World is One. Now, we are just a short while away from the budget announcement. Now, India is positioning itself as a strong manufacturing hub against China. So what does the country need to do to attract foreign investment and appear appealing as a huge manufacturing hub?
I'm not sure there's so much you can do within the budget to do that. I think there's two factors which are playing in India's favour. One obviously was that trade war between the US and China, and COVID is obviously will have corporates having to look at diversifying their operations outside of China. So India should be a beneficiary. Our tax rates are one of the lowest in Asia, and one of the things that the government's been doing, as we all know, is to try and get this manufacturing hub through PLI. And if they can continue something like that within the budget, maybe expand the number of sectors, then that I think would be a good incentive for foreign companies to look at India. Because listen, at the end of the day, India and China are going to be the growth engines of Asia and for the world. So I think you're seeing a number of companies anyway starting to put down manufacturing bases. Tesla was the recent one to announce it. So all of this is good news. So just continuation of that, just keep incentivizing companies to come. Through tax and obviously fiscal help as well.
Right. Now, Andrew, tell us a little bit about what corporates, investors and, of course, taxpayers are expecting from the finance minister.
I think we're all hoping from a tax perspective that we're not going to get any hikes, that's for sure. There is obviously kind of worries that there's going to be some kind of COVID tax, whether that will come through the markets or it'll come through personal tax, don't know. But the taxpayer, I think, has been heavily hit over the last 2 to 3 years, and therefore I would hope that we don't see any further tax rates. I think that would be a negative seen by the market. Anything to do with the markets itself with tax would be a negative, and if it's going to hit this spending power just at a time when you want people out there spending. Would obviously be harmful as well in terms of the economic recovery. So I think the market would not take any tax increases very warmly at all.
Right. Andrew, my final question for you. Now, India has shown signs of an economic recovery recently. So what does this budget need to offer to some key sectors to help sustain this recovery in the long run?
I just think we need to do more of the same. I think, the finance minister over the course of last year came out with many different programs. I think the continuation of those, maybe adding some sectors in the PLI, to help those in terms of attracting investment going forward. And obviously, infrastructure expenditure, which will have a multiplier effect, both on jobs, but on the economy, is really what we're after. I don't think we're after. I know that it's been said that, it's a budget like never before. Let's hope it's a positive one, which will continue what we've been seeing in this recovery and continue that.
Right. Absolutely. All right, Andrew, thank you so much for all your insights and thank you for joining us on this broadcast. Now, still with us on this broadcast in the news studio is, of course, Gautam Chikharmani, the Vice President of the Observer Research Foundation. Gautam, my question to you. Now, this is a budget framed when the economy, of course, is growing at 8% and it gives the Finance Minister the freedom to present a bold budget. So will this be a bold budget or not?
I don't know how bold is defined, but this will be a budget where a whole lot of spending will happen. I hope it's a budget which sort of invests, or to put it a little crudely, takes a call on growth.
Right.
It should be a growth-inducing budget. And from all the discussions that have happened, I think that growth will now come. It will be triggered by government spending. In about 4 to 6 months' time, private spending will then follow. And I think that is where we will then finally reach some form of a growth equilibrium. We are already looking at high growth rates, highest in the world. But to reach that as a certainty or as a more sustainable growth rate, I think this budget should make the investments in growth. It should take a call on growth. It should forget about other things like fiscal deficit let the fiscal deficit be breached, because inflation is under control. So the danger with fiscal deficit breaching is that inflation rises, and that creates, among other things such as hurting the poor, a political issue.
Right.
So I believe inflation is under control. It's likely to remain under control. Also, there is a band that RBI has 2 to 6%. Inflation will be controlled. Given that, if the government can go all out for growth, it should just gamble on growth and more growth.
Right. Absolutely. All right, Gautam, we'll continue our discussion momentarily. Let's give our viewers some more information about the expected budget. Now, at a time when the West is struggling with the second wave of infections, economic activities in India are likely to gather momentum as the vaccination drive gains traction. As the country recovers from COVID-19 and one of its worst years as an economy, growth is now estimated to contract by 7.7% in the current financial year. While in the next fiscal, a robust 11% GDP growth is estimated in an assessment of growth prospects of the Indian economy. 2020 was the second year in a row when foreign institutional investors' inflows into Indian equities were the highest among emerging markets. Indian equities received more than $23 billion from foreign institutional investors in 2020. Most Asian and emerging markets, in fact, witnessed outflows in the year gone by. And according to the economic survey tabled last week in Parliament, India was the only country among emerging markets to receive equity inflows from foreign portfolio investors in 2020. The country attracted $30 billion in the first 9 months of the year alone. With significant declines in COVID-19 cases across the country, hopes are rising for a strong economic recovery and earnings growth in the coming years. The case for India's growth is now getting stronger with improved exports of drugs and pharma, software and agriculture as well. The Indian pharma in particular could potentially be the pharmacy of the world. India is also expected to witness a current account surplus during this financial year after a gap of 17 years. Public spending could be another boost to the ailing economy according to the economic survey. The government spending to its maximum level can revive both private consumption and also attract private investments. That said, a massive government-driven spending effort can be expected in the budget. The government has already declared massive infrastructure boosting packages in the last 10 months. Meanwhile, according to the International Labour Organization report, 81 million jobs have been lost in the Asia-Pacific region due to the widespread upheaval. The situation is relatively acute in India. Given the persistently high domestic unemployment, the creation of jobs and revival of small businesses is now extremely significant for the government. Now, Gautam Shikharmani is still with us. Gautam, my next question for you. What can taxpayers expect from this budget? What will help them kind of beat this pandemic and come out on the other side?
I think tax, if she doesn't touch taxes, and I don't think she will touch, because reducing it is counterproductive, increasing it is counterproductive. She may just not touch taxes at all.
Right.
If anything on the tax front, I think she, as I said earlier, she should rationalize it, come back to Chidambaram's and all the ministers that have followed. We had reached an equilibrium of 3 tax slabs until last budget. And I think that we have to come back to that thing. Complicating the issue in terms of which tax applies to you out of 11 slabs and whether you want the old one or the new one is a needless complication. I don't think anybody wants it. Keep the taxes simple. If you can reduce them, fine, we'll be happy. But if you don't reduce them, we will understand that this is a tough year. But just remove all the noise around taxing. And why should paying taxes be such a taxing activity?
Right.
Make it easy, make it friendly, make it relaxed, and make it simple.
Absolutely. Sumit, coming to you, I'd like to ask you a question. What are some of the sectors that need immediate attention? Let's start with automobiles. What can be done in the budget to make that sector happy?
Well, absolutely. As we heard Mr. Srivastava saying, GST cut is something which is required, but they don't expect that to happen over. That fiscal constraints are with the government. On the other hand, scrappage policy is something they have been long waiting for. Well, scrappage policy is something that will provide an alternative to the buyers so that they go to showroom, give their old car for scrappage, get something in return. That used to be known for cash for clunker scheme in Europe. That came in 2008 and 9 after the big Lehman Brothers crisis. European governments, economies, they wanted to give boost to their automobile sector. They started cash for clunker scheme there. In India, they want something like that, scrappage policy, so that a buyer of a car or any automobile, they go to the showroom, give their old car or two-wheeler for scrappage and get a certificate or some cash reward in return and buy the new. So this is going to incentivize the overall automobile manufacturing and selling. On the other hand, well, yes, the other sectors that require immediate attention are tourism. Well, that's something which is clearly in very bad shape. We all know the reasons behind it. Aviation is one such sector which is in really bad shape. So coming from there, well, yes, real estate was something that was in doldrums earlier. Now that's also opening up a bit. Yes, there are some green shoots emerging there, but going forward, real estate has to be there because a lot of employment comes in the real estate. It's in the top 3 employment generation sector in the country. So these are the sectors that require immediate attention, and something has to be done to bring them back to the growth path.
Absolutely, that's the hope now. Now, the global economic revival hinges on how India performs in the next few quarters. So this budget is being closely watched around the world as of now. The Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, during his Davos address, talked about the need to keep reforming the Indian economy to try and move up the ease of doing business rankings. The budget is expected to unveil policies along those very lines. This includes streamlining labour laws and improving the access to resources like electricity. This budget presents an opportunity for India to draw away investors from an opaque Chinese market and possibly place itself at the centre of a new supply chain. The likes of Japan and South Korea have already moved in this very direction. This budget is an opportunity for India to do the same. The focus will, of course, be on production-linked incentives, or PLIs. According to Credit Suisse, the PLI schemes could contribute about 1.7% to the GDP. In Washington, the new Biden White House, of course, will be watching the budget closely. Analysts expect the new president to roll back the Trump-era taxes. Plus, there will be more predictability in America's policy under Joe Biden. The fiscal stimulus will also help put money in the pockets of the average Indian, thereby bolstering one of the world's largest middle classes. India remains a huge market for multinational producers, and they will be looking at how India clears and charts its recovery. The world had a dire forecast for India's COVID-19 outbreak, but the country has beaten the odds and is now leading the global vaccination drive. Moving on to some other global news now. In a big development from Myanmar, the military has now taken control of the country for 1 year. Myanmar's leader Aung San Suu Kyi and other senior figures from the ruling party were detained in a series of raids. Myanmar's military rebukes foreign embassies and denies impeding the transition. The move comes days after rising tensions between the civilian government and the powerful military, and indications of a military coup from the Myanmar army. According to the ruling party, that is the National League for Democracy spokesperson, Suu Kyi, the president, Win Myint and other leaders had been taken away. The spokesperson also added that he expects himself also to be arrested, and with the given situation, we have to assume that the military is now staging a coup. Phone lines to Naypyidaw, the capital, were not reachable in the early hours of Monday. The raids have taken place on the day that Parliament in the capital was due to start sitting after a November election that the NLD had won in a landslide. Even as tensions escalated between the civilian government and the powerful military, members of parliament took up their seats. Soldiers were deployed outside the city hall in Myanmar's main city of Yangon. The witness said that a dozen soldiers were in front of the building which houses the city's administration, while several military trucks surrounded the hall. Just hours after Suu Kyi was detained, Myanmar's state media MRTV reported having technical issues which disabled broadcasts. Myanmar's radio and television said on a post on Facebook, "Due to current communication difficulties, we'd like to respectfully inform you that the regular programs of MRTV and Myanmar radio cannot be broadcast." The escalating rift stirred fears of a coup in the aftermath of an election which the army says was fraudulent. The country's powerful military generals have been since threatening to take action against what they called a fraudulent election. Suu Kyi's party, the National League for Democracy, won 83% of the seats in the November election. Myanmar's election commission had rejected the military's allegations of voter fraud. The commission had said that there were no big errors enough to affect the credibility of the vote. The constitution reserves 25% of the seats in parliament for the military and control of 3 key ministries in Suu Kyi's administration. Nobel Peace Prize winner Suu Kyi, who is 75, came to power after a 2015 landslide election win. This followed decades of house arrest in a struggle for democracy that turned her into an international icon. Comments from Myanmar's military had raised fears of a coup earlier last week, but it later said that it would protect and abide by the constitution and act according to law. We're also getting an update just now on this story that the United States has just now also expressed grave concerns regarding the military coup in Myanmar. The United States has warned of a response over the military detention of Myanmar's officials. And a statement by the White House spokesperson Jen Psaki read, President Biden has been briefed by the NSA and we continue to affirm our strong support for Burma's democratic institutions and urge the military and all other parties to adhere to democratic norms and the rule of law and to release those detained today. The US opposes any attempt to alter the outcome of recent elections or impede Myanmar's democratic transition and will take action against those responsible if these steps are not reversed. We're monitoring the situation closely and stand with the people of Burma. Time now for a short break on WION The World is One. Stay tuned. We'll bring you all the highlights and expectations from the budget 2021-22.
India Budget 2021, presented by MRF ZLX. You can bet on it. Powered by
LIC, Har Pal Aapke Saath.
Co-powered by Cred. Download the app. All new Nissan Magnite. Ignite your charisma.
Usha Bloom Series fans. Zindagi Khil Utte.
WION now available in the United States. Download the app now.
Stay connected with the world through WION. Like the page on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter for new alerts. Instagram for videos and images. And the website for the latest news, views, and analysis. WIONews.com. World is one.
One World Trade Center, that is the one where the impact.
The cause of India's freedom for many years.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
Work in progress.
From the world's most volatile region, conflicts over faith and boundaries. Stories of death, destruction, despair, and hope. WION brings you to the heart of the action. Incisive analysis, unrivaled perspective, and exclusive ground reports. Watch West Asia Post every Friday, 8:30 p.m. IST with me, Radi Francis. Only on WION. World is one.
Presented by MRF ZLX. You can bet on it. Powered by
LIC, Har Pal Aapke Saath.
Co-powered by Cred. Download the app. All new Nissan Magnite. Ignite your charisma.
Usha Bloom series fans. Zindagi Kil Utte.
Hello and welcome. You're watching WION World is One. My name is Shobhit Mittal. In just a few minutes from now, India's Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman will present what is arguably the most important budget for India in the past few years. The pandemic has battered the global economy, unemployment figures are soaring, and the common man needs all the support they can get from the Indian government. While India's economy too suffered in 2020, the outlook for the year ahead is positive. The IMF predicts India to emerge as the fastest growing economy in the world. But the questions remain. What steps will the government take to boost employment, to boost demand, to provide security and stability, and to fulfill its goal of an Atmanirbhar or self-reliant India? It's going to be a first ever digital budget, and we will get you all the updates with a special panel of guests. Stay with us here on WION. First up, here are the headlines. India's Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman is all set to present the Union Budget 2021-22 today. The budget assumes significance as it comes amid the coronavirus pandemic, with hopes that it will help to revitalize the Indian economy. The Myanmar military stages a coup in the country and takes control of the country for 1 year, declaring a state of emergency. Earlier, Myanmar's military detained the country's de facto leader, Suu Kyi, and the country's president. The dramatic escalation came after weeks of rising tensions between the military and the civilian government over allegations of fraud in November's elections. The United States urges Myanmar military to release detained officials, warns of stern response over military coup. India too expresses its deep concern. In a statement, the Ministry of External Affairs says that India has always been steadfast in its support to the process of democratic transition in Myanmar. In a massive clampdown on protests demanding the release of jailed Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny, police in Russia detained more than 5,000 people. This as thousands of protesters defied government warnings to rally from Vladivostok to St. Petersburg in a second weekend of mass demonstrations over the arrest of Putin critic Alexei Navalny. A suspected suicide car bomb in Somalia's capital, followed by a shootout between militants and security forces at a hotel, causes an unknown number of casualties. The militant Islamist group Al-Shabaab, which is linked to terror group Al-Qaeda, claimed responsibility through its radio station. The European Union announces progress in its battle to get the vaccine doses promised by drugs manufacturer AstraZeneca, as AstraZeneca now says it will increase its coronavirus vaccine deliveries to the EU by 30%. The British-Swedish company had earlier backtracked on its original plan and said it could deliver only a quarter of the doses originally promised to the bloc. India's Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman is about to unveil the first ever digital-only budget for financial year 2021-22. This year's Union Budget 2021-22 assumes special significance in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. Today's will be a budget of many firsts. The first time in the history of independent India, the budget papers will not be printed. The Finance Ministry has decided not to print the budget documents in physical form, this time amid the pandemic scare. It will be digitally most accessible Union Budget of all time, available online on Union Budget mobile application.
budget.
Now, we are being joined by a very special panel of guests, but first let's go across to Andrew Ferris, the CEO of Ecognosis Advisory. He is joining us from Hong Kong. Andrew, there are many sectors in India that desperately are in need for aid, isn't it? Healthcare sector needs massive backing, so does tourism and hospitality sector, with global travel severely affected. Food and beverage industry needs continued support, with restaurants and bars shut for large parts of last year. The farmers have been staging a protest. What will be the key focus area for the Indian government? Now, government has been pushing for Atmanirbhar Bharat, or a self-reliant India. That is the need, isn't it, going forward?
Well, undoubtedly, the health service sector and the emergency aspect of the coronavirus will take top concern. But I'm afraid this is, in a way, a kind of a one-off in a progressive situation. What is very important, not to be forgotten, because India has made spectacularly good progress on that, was on climate control, because Mr. Modi has announced that India is very likely this year to achieve and surpass her Paris 15 commitments. And it is also very, very near of having 40% of all energy produced by non-fossil fuels, and also has perhaps the most spectacular utilization of both solar and wind energy in providing electricity. This cannot and should not be forgotten. You know, the people in Delhi and in Mumbai that choke every year on the horrible climatic position of India will remember that. Yeah, I agree. There are the farmers, and there are the exporters, and there are the transport sector, and there are the infrastructure sector. There are piles and piles of things. But for me, the climate is something that I think India should take literally a lead in the world. Never mind sending satellites to Mars. That's nonsense. But India taking a lead, an underdeveloped country taking a lead in climate control, superb. Good publicity and, of course, very, very good humanitarian and economic progress.
Absolutely. I know that the world needs to focus on the climate emergency, not just India. The world needs to focus on this climate emergency that is certainly a huge challenge for every global power. But for the common man in the middle of this pandemic, the first thing they need right now is jobs, isn't it? Unemployment figures in India rose by close to 11% from November to December last year. What is the government going to do, or what steps is the government going to do to boost businesses, or to help businesses hire back more people? Close to 35 million people are unemployed in India.
Having brought the good news on the table, the bad news concerns three specific aspects. One is the actual numbers on which all this is based, and expectations that India the GDP shrunk by about 9.6% in the course of 20, and it is supposedly going to increase by 9.2% in the course of 21, and that is very good news for employment. I'm afraid it misses out a very important point. This enormous rebound from -9 to +9 is on the basis of a very low base. In other words, it is a real figure, but it's not real in actual output, jobs and employment. So we have to keep this in mind. The second point is, of course, the incredibly draconian lockdown that took place nearly a year ago, something like 9 months ago, led to something like, the numbers were absolutely staggering, between 25 to 100 million mobile itinerant workers to lose their jobs and go drift back to the countryside. But I'm afraid this cannot be undone that very quickly. And I'm afraid I'll have to go back to that stupid experiment with the substitution of the rupee notes that left a very deep indentation that still reverberates. So yes, the government has a lot of things to do, some of which were completely its own doing. And throughout the last year, whereas even small countries went into steep budget deficits to do something, actually India did very little. I've seen numbers that, taken together what the Reserve Bank of India and what the government itself did, that runs to about 1.1, 1.2% of the fiscal deficit being, in a sense, reinvented. So yes, they have a lot to do, but a great deal to do.
Absolutely. You know, the world's eyes, Andrew, is it fair to say that the world's eyes will be on India because the IMF has predicted that India will be one of the fastest growing economies in the world post-pandemic. So is the world looking towards India? Is the world looking for India to set a blueprint or a roadmap for other developing nations to follow?
Of the vaccination, and of course poor India has 1.2 billion to vaccinate, it is absurd to expect that things will happen very, very quickly. But I think the eyes of the world will be to policies that are not knee-jerk, that take very, very good consideration of the available resources, and also continue to maintain the lead of India on the climate side. The obsession with the fiscal deficit is not irrelevant. You know, the fiscal deficit right now is, we're likely to see something like, 7% in the course of 21, and the target is 3%. So we're talking about double plus. But 34 to 35% of all the revenues raised by the Indian government goes to pay interest rates.
Right.
That's absurd. It's completely stupid. It has been like that for years, incidentally. I'm not bringing any news. So the way in which this is going to be paid for is extremely important, because raising the fiscal deficit only continues to take 1/3 of whatever they raise, goes straight into interest rates.
Right, Andrew Ferris, thank you so much for joining us, CEO of Recognisis Advisory. Thank you so much as we look forward to the first ever digital budget in India. We are playing out visuals on the screen of India's finance minister, who has just reached the parliament and will be presenting in just a short while from now. Also joining us in the studio right now is Suman Berry, formerly member of Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council. Suman, thank you so much for giving us your time. Welcome to WION. It's not all bad, isn't it? The IMF predicts that next year, post-pandemic, India will emerge as the fastest growing economy, the only global economy, major global economy to grow at a double-digit growth. But what are the demands of the common man? We already discussed unemployment. Are there going to be any steps taken to reduce taxation? Will taxes be lowered? What help is the small businesses, MSMEs, going to get in this budget?
Shobit, this is my first time at WION, and I'm very pleased to be here. I think that growing fast is certainly important. It's important for the world. It's important for India. But the economic survey that came out on Friday, it was very, clear and candid that even so, India will be well behind where it would have been, which is to say we're growing fast because we went down so fast. And so I just want to, before addressing your question, indicate what I'm looking for in the budget. I think the first point is that India, as it were, has suffered probably a higher growth slowdown than most other emerging markets. I heard you ask the previous speaker about this. I think, second, we have to appreciate the complexity of the challenge facing the government, because we are talking about a rebound, which is V-shaped. We're talking about a recovery, but most importantly, we have to lay now the grounds for rebuilding.
Right.
Okay. Now to come to your question about the common man and the MSMEs. Look, I think the strategy of the government, and the correct strategy, has been to say some of what the new economy is going to look like may well mean that some of these MSMEs are no longer viable. I'm talking about businesses rather than individuals. So let us try and do what we can to support individuals while still permitting what economists call adjustment in the economy.
You know, there are thousands and millions of MSMEs in India who employ millions of people.
Yes.
And most of these MSMEs are small businesses. They don't have the capital to sustain large periods of lockdown. And they must have suffered during the lockdown. How is the government going to help them?
Again, I think focusing on the enterprises rather than the employees is a mistake. Okay? I think the point that you made to the previous speaker about unemployment is the important one.
Absolutely.
Okay. And I think what we are looking at, Shobit, is an important budget really from the point of view of employment. Because India's employment problem has been a long-running sore. It only became exposed during the pandemic, partly because of the migrant issue, etc. Right. And so what we need now is not a band-aid, but really to think through what constitutes a healthier employment position.
Right. So as we are getting up for the budget, let's go across to WION's business editor, Sumit, who's joining us with details on how the markets are reacting ahead of the budget. Sumit, over to you.
Well, Shobit, thanks for this, and let's take a look at markets. Since the morning, the markets have been going up. As we see, Sensex is up by over 400 points. Well, clearly there is some expectation building up on account of some announcements that can happen in budget. The challenges are there plenty, but markets are hopeful that government will find some way so that there is something which is given to overall economy. Based on the assumptions, markets are up. So today, the markets are up on the expectations, but this week there's another big event. It's RBI's policy that's going to happen on Friday. So markets are expecting interest rates to, they will not be tinkered with, and that's what is again some relief to markets. Overall, there is generally it happens that the markets close in red on budget day. But if we look over the last 1 year, or we can say the 10 months, well, really there's a big bounce in market. They have doubled. Sensex has doubled from 25,000 to 50,000 marks. So clearly a big boost that has been given to India's stock market. Today also we can see overall the Sensex going up, and there can be some volatility going forward when the markets overall enter and the budget speech is being announced. Then there's a zigzag. Since the morning, Asian markets, Taiwan and China both are in green, other are mixed. So that's how the markets are going to move now. Later on part of the day, they will depend on how European markets open. Back to you, Shobit.
Sumit, thank you so much for getting us those details. We'll keep coming back to you as we can tell our viewers Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has reached the Parliament any moment now. She will present the budget. Also joining us on this broadcast is Amy Casman, South Asia Bureau Chief, Financial Times. Amy, thank you so much for giving us your time. Welcome to WION. Now, India emerged as a reliable destination for foreign investment during the pandemic. The global supply chains were affected and countries pushed to end reliance on China. India emerged as a key alternative. India had the maximum growth in the world as far as FDI in 2020 is concerned, greater than that of China. Countries like United States, UK and Russia had negative FDI growth in 2020. So what's making India such a reliable destination for foreign investors?
Well, I think it's important, first of all, to put the FDI growth numbers in context. India's FDI, the growth comes off a pretty low base. So this increase is significant, but at the same time, it also comes from a fact that, FDI has not been traditionally very, very strong in India. It's also important to remember that most of the robust growth in FDI in India has actually not flown. There has been some pickup in manufacturing investment, but a huge percentage of the FDI growth actually relates to global multinational tech companies investing in Reliance Jio and also in Reliance Retail. So in fact, what has actually happened is multinational companies that are interested in exposure in India have decided that teaming up with Mr. Mukesh Ambani and Reliance is a very smart bet in order to capitalize on what they see as future growth. And so they've all, Mr. Ambani has offloaded significant stakes to companies like Facebook and Google. And so this is that kind of investment. It's a play on the Indian consumer market, and it's a bet that if they team up with him, they'll be able to ride on his coattails and basically kind of have exposure to the Indian consumer market. This is not a massive inflow of the kind of manufacturing investment that India so badly needs in order to generate jobs. Not to say that it's not important and not interesting, but the fact of the matter is that in terms of alternative to China, a lot of investment in terms of companies looking to diversify manufacturing supply chains, a lot of that investment has flowed to places like Vietnam and other places in Southeast Asia, and not as much to India as India would like. But obviously, that is an area where the government is hoping to make an impact and woo a lot of countries and companies to say India is a better bet than China, or for those of you that are looking to diversify your supply chains, please welcome and come look here.
Absolutely. So what steps will the Indian government take to boost more foreign investment? We also spoke about unemployment. That remains the key focus in this budget, isn't it? What was, according to you, did urban India suffer more or did rural India suffer more as far as joblessness is concerned during the pandemic?
Look, I think it's quite apparent that the joblessness has been widespread, and to somehow suggest that urban India and rural India are somehow disconnected is kind of false, because we see that in fact they're heavily, heavily connected. And when jobs in cities fell, like when lockdown happened and, jobs disappeared and, factories came shuddering to a halt, all those workers, 140 million of them estimated, many of them are migrants from rural areas, and the rural areas depend on their remittances from the cities. And it's not that, that these two areas are separate. So if jobs in urban areas, disappear and dry up, the impact is felt both in the urban areas and back in the rural areas, where this flow of income is a very important part of many rural households' budgets. And you saw that the result of that was a massive outflow of people from India's cities back to rural areas, and a massive surge in demand for the government's rural job generating scheme, NREGA, which is kind of like an insurance program that gives people in rural areas an opportunity to earn something. So I think, both urban and rural areas have suffered a lot. Jobs are jobs, and it's not like it's only in the jobs are in the cities, but when the jobs in cities and industrial areas dry up, the ripples and repercussions are also felt back home in the most remote rural villages, where people depend on, relatives in the cities to send them money every month. And in many areas, those remittances, internal remittances within India, play a huge portion of rural household budgets.
Absolutely, but according to recent, you're absolutely right, it's absolutely linked the urban economy to the rural economy. But for the first time in recent past, the urban unemployment rate was 8.8%, which is lower than rural unemployment rate of 7.6%. The rural economy needs help. The farmers were also out on the roads. We will also focus on the manufacturing sector, infrastructure sector, the travel, food and business sector, all that coming up. Stay with us, but we have to slip into a short break.
Budget 2021, presented by MRF ZLX. You can bet on it. Powered by
LIC, Har Pal Aapke Saath.
Co-powered by Cred. Download the app. all-new Nissan Magnite. Ignite your charisma.
Usha Bloom series fans. Zindagi Khel Utte.
WION now available in the United States. Download the app now.
Stay connected with the world through WION. Like the page on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter for new alerts. Instagram for videos and images. And the website for the latest news, views, and analysis. WIONews.com. World is one.
One World Trade Center, that is the one where the impact.
The cause of India's freedom for many years.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
Work in progress.
Gravitas and Palki Sharma Upadhyay.
From the world's most volatile region, conflicts over faith and boundaries. Stories of death, destruction, despair, and hope. WION brings you to the heart of the action. Incisive analysis, unrivaled perspective, and exclusive ground reports. Watch West Asia Post every Friday, 8:30 p.m. IST with me, Ghadi Francis. Only on WION, World is One.
Stay connected with the world through WION. Like the page on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter for new alerts. Instagram for videos and images. And the website for the latest news, views, and analysis. WIONews.com. World is one.
One World Trade Center, that is the one where the impact.
The cause of India's freedom for many years.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
Work in progress.
Gravitas and Palki Sharma Upadhyay.
From the world's most volatile region, conflicts over faith and boundaries. Stories of death, destruction, despair, and hope. WION brings you to the heart of the action. Incisive analysis, unrivaled perspective, and exclusive ground reports. Watch West Asia Post every Friday, 8:30 p.m. IST with me, Ghadi Francis. Only on WION. World is one.
Stay connected with the world through WION. Like the page on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter for new alerts. Instagram for videos and images. And the website for the latest news, views, and analysis. WIONews.com. World is one.
2021. Presented by MRF ZLX. You can bet on it. Powered by
LIC, Harpal Aapke Saath.
Co-powered by Cred. Download the app. All new Nissan Magnite. Ignite your charisma.
Usha Bloom Series Bands. Zindagi Khil Utte.
Yes, hello and welcome. You're watching WION World is One. I am Shobhit Mittal. In just minutes from now, India's Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman will be presenting what is arguably the most important budget for India in many, many years. The pandemic has battered global economy. India has been no different. Unemployment figures are soaring, but the outlook for the year ahead is good. IMF predicts that India will grow at a double-digit pace. The year ahead, India will emerge as the fastest growing economy in the world. But the fact remains that the common man needs all the help he can get from the Indian government. Stay with us on this broadcast. We've got a special panel of guests lined up for you, and we'll tell you everything you need to know about the budget. Now, at a time when the West is still struggling with the second wave of the pandemic, economic activities in India are likely to gather momentum as the vaccination drive gets traction. As the country recovers from COVID and one of its worst years as an economy, growth is estimated to contract by 7.7% in the current financial year. While in the next fiscal, the robust 11% GDP growth is estimated in an assessment of growth prospects of the Indian economy. 2020 was the second year in a row when foreign institutional investors' inflows into Indian equities were highest among emerging markets. Indian equities received more than $23 billion from foreign institutional investors in 2020. Most Asian and emerging markets, in fact, witnessed outflows in the year gone by. According to the economic survey tabled last week in the Parliament, India was the only country among emerging markets to receive equity inflows from foreign portfolio investors in 2020. The country attracted $30 billion in the first 9 months of the year. With significant decline in COVID-19 cases across India, hopes are rising for strong economic recovery and earnings growth in coming years. The case for India's growth is getting stronger with improved exports and drugs and pharma, software and agriculture. Indian pharma in particular could potentially be the pharmacy of the world. India is also expected to witness current account surplus during this financial year after a gap of 17 years. Public spending could be another boost to the ailing economy. According to the economic survey, government spending to its maximum level can revive both private consumption and also attract private investments. That said, a massive government-driven spending effort can be expected in the budget. The government has already declared massive infrastructure boosting packages in the last 10 months. Meanwhile, according to the International Labour Organization report, 81 million jobs have been lost in the Asia Pacific due to the widespread upheaval. The situation is relatively acute in India, given the persistently high domestic unemployment. Creation of jobs and revival of small businesses is now extremely significant for the Indian government. Now, we've got Santosh Iyer, Vice President, Sales and Marketing of Mercedes-Benz, joining us on India. Also in the studio with us is Suman Berry, former member of Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council, and we'll be discussing with them what can be expected in this budget. But first, let's go across to Santosh Iyer, Vice President, Sales and Marketing of Mercedes-Benz India. Santosh, what was the impact of lockdown and the restrictions on the auto sector? How severe was the impact on demand in 2020, and what steps is the industry expecting from the Indian government in this budget?
I think, thanks. I think if you look at the auto sector recovery, it has been remarkable. But when we try to draw correlation, and the V-shaped recovery is actually coming from an A-shaped A-shaped COVID infections, because if you see India's chart, clearly the infection rates are sharply going down. Thankfully, we don't have any second wave, what we see in other parts of the world. And I think that's really accelerating, and they're both directly correlational. Of course, this is supported by good monsoons, and emergence of demand, a bit of revenge buying, more so that we see in the luxury segment. And I think till now, the recovery has been great. But we should also not remember that, we are celebrating now, even reaching 2019 levels. The real challenge will now be, how can we now go past the 2019 levels, come back to the double-digit growth, keeping 2019 as a baseline. And I think this budget should give the right stimulus for the industry to go in that direction.
Absolutely. So, one of the biggest challenges for the Indian government currently is boosting demand in the market, isn't it? Not just only in the auto sector, but across the board. But speaking to you about the auto sector, is there hope in the auto sector that there will be a boost in demand in the country now at a time when economic activity in India has restarted, while many parts of the West are still facing restrictions or lockdowns?
I think the Indian auto sector has shown resilience, and they have really risen up to the occasion. And when I say the full sector, be it suppliers, OEMs, dealers, partners, and in this crisis period, they have come up, we have been able to revive the sentiments. And I think that's an incredible achievement to start with. Moving forward, whether this trend will continue is also depending on also some measures. What we are really looking forward is to government to appreciate the efforts and maybe have some stability in the policy, because if now there is a feeling that the sector is doing well and it can be taxed more, or maybe there can be cess and other ideas, then that may be detrimental. The second point that we see is culturally as a country, we are a bit traditional. We have been looking at savings as a mindset, very strong focus on fiscal deficit. But I think a lot of experts have already said earlier also that it's time to come out of this, time to spend and drive the economy forward. I think there was a vision for a 5 trillion economy by 2025. That still can be held valid if this budget is able to drive that growth in infrastructure and spending, then focusing just on the fiscal discipline, which also is important. But maybe it's time now India rises up to the occasion, and there can not be a better time than a crisis.
Santosh Iyer, Vice President, Sales and Marketing of Mercedes-Benz India. Thank you so much for joining us on WION, giving us your time. Suman Berry continues to be with us, former member of Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council. Suman, we recently saw thousands of farmers on the road, a section of the farming community out on the roads. The agri sector needs help. Rural unemployment figures are soaring as well. So what steps do you expect from the government to help the farmers, to help the agri economy?
Well, I think the big step that government is taking, has taken, which affects only a portion of the farm economy, is of course the minimum support price and procurement. But there is the problem that, what they're doing is providing short-term support for a situation that's becoming unviable. And if I could just build on this, I think the challenge, what I'm going to be listening for in the budget, is how the government, the finance minister, defines a roadmap for a future India which is not trapped in the past. But as we have seen with the farm protests, that's not easy, and it takes political management. So I would say that there is a lot already happening for agriculture, but what we need is an agriculture that is much more fully integrated into global markets, which means that the government has to be much more...
Does the agri sector need reform, in your opinion?
Oh, I think there's no question about that. Yeah, I mean, the question of, the pace and sequencing of reform, and also the role of the union government versus the role of the states. But I think that, there is a dynamic agriculture there that is waiting to burst forward. But Shobit, let me also say that, you can't move people out of agriculture until you have a vibrant urban economy. Okay, so that has really been our problem, the problem that you referred to earlier, which is that we've not been able to create good jobs in the urban areas, and so there are more people on the land. So that's...
Close to 50% of India's population is somewhere involved in rural economy. Agriculture is dependent on agriculture. And
well, this is an absolute minefield. When I was Director General of the NCAR, we did detailed surveys of this. And so, yes, people have a toehold in the land, but as Amy said earlier in the program, the fact of the matter is that there's integration between the urban labor force and the rural labor force. And I would only say that if 60% or 70% of the economy is in services, then it must mean that a large part of the agricultural labor force is also engaged in services.
Right.
So to consider that everybody who is in a rural jurisdiction is in agriculture, that's completely wrong. Okay? So you're talking about, I come back to what I said before, there's an issue of supporting activities and sectors, which is the way you put the question, and then there's the issue of supporting people.
Right.
So I think this government has rightly focused, including with a portable ration card. You focus on the people because in a dynamic economy, people can't keep doing what they've been used to doing. But people are very resistant to change. Okay?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, Suman Berry, thank you so much for joining us on this broadcast, giving us your opinion on what can be expected in what is clearly the most significant budget for India in recent years. The global economic revival hinges on how India performs in the next few quarters. So this budget is being closely watched around the world. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, during his Davos address, talked about the need to keep reforming the Indian economy to try and move up the ease of doing business rankings. The budget is expected to unveil policies along those lines. Now, this includes streamlining India's labor laws and improving access to resources like electricity. This budget presents an opportunity for India to draw away investors from an opaque Chinese market and possibly place itself at the center of a new global supply chain. The likes of Japan and South Korea have already moved in this direction. The budget is an opportunity for India to do the same. The focus will be on production-linked incentives, or PLIs. According to Credit Suisse, the PLI schemes could contribute 1.7% to the GDP. In Washington, the new Biden White House will be watching the Indian budget closely. Analysts expect the new president to roll back Trump-era taxes, plus there will be more predictability in America's policies under Joe Biden. The fiscal stimulus will also help put money in the pockets of the average Indian, thereby bolstering one of the world's largest middle classes. India remains a huge market for multinational producers. They will be looking at how India charts its recovery. The world had a dire forecast for India's COVID outbreak, but the country has beaten all the odds and is now leading the global vaccination drive. India, being the pharmacy of the world, is also providing free vaccines to its neighbors and other countries across the world. At this moment, we are also being joined by Gautam Chikramani, who's the Vice President of ORF. Gautam, welcome. Thank you for giving us your time. Once again, as we are just minutes away from the budget, the key focus, according to you, should be on how to reduce unemployment, how to give jobs back to people. Many businesses were shut, many people, millions of them lost their jobs during the pandemic. How does the government help the situation through this budget?
I don't think one budget can change a problem which is systemic or which is much wider than what we see it to be. There has been a short-term job loss, no doubt, but a single budget cannot change that.
Absolutely.
Having said that, I think the only way and the only answer for all of India's problems, which relate to budget in any manner or economic policy making, converge on just one word. It's called growth. If the budget can deliver growth, which I think it will, I'm in fact pretty certain it will. All signals in the economic survey are there and all discussions are pointing to that direction. Then growth will create jobs. Growth will reduce poverty. As has been seen in the past, the 300 million people that have been pulled out of poverty over the last 20 years is only because of growth. It's not because of any redistribution policies. If the government wants jobs back, And it should want back not only because it's a good thing for India, but it's also for its own survival.
Right.
It's a political issue.
Absolutely.
If the government does want jobs back, all it needs to do is focus on growth. That growth is going to come through government spending in the initial parts, about 6 to 10 months, maybe a year of government stimulus that goes into creating infrastructure, for instance, followed by private sector investment. So on the one side, it has to spend, not thinking about the fiscal deficit, for instance, in this one calamitous year, and then enabling mechanisms or making policy announcements that we can see follow through over the next 2 or 3 months from different ministries that enable, catalyze and encourage entrepreneurs to come, invest, put up manufacturing or services capacities and create jobs.
Absolutely. Suman, as we're getting ever closer to the budget, any moment now, Madam Sitharaman will present the budget in the Parliament. What's that one thing that you're looking for in this budget?
Look, I think I just want to build on the very important points that Gautam has made in 2 ways. Okay, I once had the privilege of listening to a very senior Singapore official ask the question, does India actually want growth? Because in the modern world, as Singapore has demonstrated, we know how to deliver growth. So the issue is one of political will. And frankly, I would say that certainly not under the UPA, and frankly, in many respects, not in Modi 1, would I say that the behavior of the government was signaling that we want growth at all costs. Right. So I think I'm going to be listening to hear, is it in fact growth, as to use the German über alles, that this government wants? I'm not convinced, but that's what I'm going to be listening for. The second point I'd like to make, to build on what Gautam has said, is does the world actually want India to grow? I say this because, there is an important narrative in the advanced countries, which is that, we have been overwhelmed by the growth of China, that that this is going to add to pollution, that's going to add to emissions, forgetting completely about their responsibility for the stock of emissions there. So I'm not even sure that, while that the world is as keen on Indian growth. And so it is for us a political challenge and a diplomatic challenge, but I couldn't agree more that, if we do not deliver fast growth, the political, as it were, consequences will be incalculable. And I'm just hoping that because we have such a shrewd and subtle person as Prime Minister, that he will, in a sense, act on that political impulse.
No, absolutely. Growth is a need not only for the common man, but it's a political need for the government as well, like you rightly pointed out. But like Andrew had also pointed out earlier, does the growth have to be linked to a sustainable growth in terms of green energy, green growth? How does the government balance this? There are questions about,
Gautam, may I just quickly respond to this?
Please go ahead.
Because I know, all I would say is, it is rich countries who emit less. So the way for us to emit less is to get rich. You?
I would say this budget should forget about emissions and pollutions.
For now, yes.
And it should blindly and in a very clear manner focus on growth. Sustainability will follow. And if you do want to go a little off budget, and what the government could do in the subsequent 3 months or 6 months, I would say, do you know how many laws govern doing business in India? Do you have any idea? 1,500 laws. These are acts of parliament and state governments. Do you know how many compliances at an aggregate the businesses face? About 70,000, 69,233 compliances.
Right.
6,600 filings have to be made. Each of those filings has several pages. These kind of bureaucratic, rent-seeking enablements for corruption have to go. These are not easy to go, but they have to go. In fact, during last year, Madhya Pradesh had come out with a very beautiful model in reducing these of process reforms and had done doing business much easier. We wait to see how it shows up in the subsequent years. But this is what I call regulatory cholesterol, And above all, we can do all what we want, spending, financing, big bad banks, fiscal deficit, infrastructure. But until the entrepreneur feels emboldened enough that he will not be harassed by the state.
Right. Ease of doing business.
Let us not just say state, by the petty officials of the state, who have nothing to do with the state. They are personal, they are corrupt.
Right.
If these laws can be standardized, digitized, organized, I think that would create growth irrespective of what the world thinks, irrespective of what the pollution
is. Ease of doing business, a key focus area for you as well, Sumant?
Well, two points. One is that this has been very much a focus in the economic survey, and all power to them, because this is the software of government. The second point, though, I would make is that there's a lot of intervention in China by the party, etc., hasn't stopped them from growing. So, getting regulation and the public-private interface right is the supreme political challenge, I would say, for the government.
We've discussed the common man, we've discussed the farmers, but there are certain key sectors who've been very badly affected in the past year. Travel industry, the food and beverage industry, manufacturing. What are those industries looking for in this budget? Either of you, sir.
So travel, like I said earlier, travel and tourism is going to pick up like never before. In fact, it's going to grow so fast, you wouldn't even know that it was in some form of a recession.
No, but they are facing
because the moment the vaccines are
issues
here,
currently.
They are facing issues currently, there's no doubt about that. Several other people are. But just to talk about these two industries, you will see over the next 3 months as India's vaccine delivery within India hits 1 million vaccines a day. You will see in the next 3 to 6 months, the same airlines that are now down in the dumps will be over capacity. They'll be facing a problem of over capacity.
How do they survive till then?
I think they've done a fairly good job. How do they survive till then? I don't have any answer right now. Each airline is unique.
Right.
These are tough times.
It's not just airlines, it's small hotels, small businesses.
I agree with that. I agree with that. And if that is part of doing business, and this is a black swan event.
Right.
Even individuals have faced problems, they have lost jobs. Right. Small businesses even worse so.
Yes.
And so I think that's a pandemic problem, let us say.
Yes,
everybody faces that problem.
Yes. It's not
as far as these two sectors are concerned, I am very optimistic. Just a couple of 3 to 4 months and they will be back in business like never before. You will see ticket prices. It will reflect in the way ticket prices rise.
Absolutely. These industries have been heard the world over, not just in India, and which is why we are saying that the world may be looking for India to find solutions in this budget or way forward. Sumant?
Well, simply to say that we are assuming that the pandemic is licked for all time, okay? And I think that underlies what Gautam has been saying. I hope that's so. But we may, and this is supporting the point he's made, we may be in a situation where confidence returns in India, but confidence in India does not return abroad, and therefore all the people who would have been going to Thailand, who have been going to Singapore, etc., will be condemned or confined to the Indian space, in which case the scenario he's painting. But I think the other point is that, we, unlike the rich countries, we are very, very tax constrained. And I think that, the philosophy of this government, that look, if you are a big enterprise, we are giving you a moratorium, etc., you know your business, you have to trim back this, that, and the other. So don't always look to government for handouts, okay? Because the people who are really hurting, they need the government more than these people do. And that's also been the attitude in both Europe and the United States, So people have drawn down credit lines, etc. But I know we're approaching the witching hour. So
I agree. I completely agree with him. Where I slightly differ is the India part. I think if you look at FDI numbers, they are at an all-time high, despite during this pandemic. A lot of companies have invested in India. Right. Foreign companies have invested in India. So I think the interest in India may be actually rising.
Yeah, I was just talking about travel. I wasn't talking about investment.
And once the investments come, travel will follow. So I think India is in a very unique place, but then all countries are. And this is truly a black swan event. And, like Suman just said, that we don't know whether this will end. It looks with the high probability that it may end. But there is no will here.
Absolutely,
So,
with the vaccination drive
the
having started, there is confidence that we will be back to the pre-pandemic levels soon. But how long will it take for Indian economy to be back at pre-pandemic levels?
I think we are looking at 11.5% growth next year and 6.8% the year after. These are estimates of the IMF. Both these numbers are the highest in the world, right? Of any significantly large economy. So I think we are going to do better than what we have. And as we have shown in the vaccine area, India is now a global benchmark.
Right.
Not only in the production but also in the creation of vaccines, innovation. Likewise, I think the economic growth, given that we are starting from
Gautam,
a low
stay with
base,
us. We're cutting across live now to the Parliament, where any moment now, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman will present the budget.
श्रीमती निर्मला सीतारमण जी, आप बैठ जाए माननीय सदस्य, प्लीज माननीय सदस्य, प्लीज माननीय सदस्य, प्लीज.
धन्यवाद जी. ऑनरेबल
आपको बोलने का मौका दूंगा बजट के बाद, माननीय वित्त मंत्री जी.
ऑनरेबल स्पीकर, I present the budget for the year 2021-2022. As introduction, Honorable Speaker, the preparation of this budget was undertaken in circumstances like never before. We knew of calamities that have affected a country or a region within a country. But what we have endured with COVID-19 to 2020 is sui generis. When I presented the budget 2020-2021, we could not have imagined that the global economy, already in throes of a slowdown, would be pushed into an unprecedented contraction. We could not have also imagined then that our people, as those in other countries, would have to endure the loss of near and dear ones and suffer. The Prime Minister announced the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana, valued at 2.76 lakh crores, that provided free food grain to 800 million people, free cooking gas for 80 million families per month, and cash directly to over 400 million farmers, women, elderly, the poor and the needy. Even as a large section of citizens stayed home, milk, vegetables, fruit suppliers, health and sanitary workers, truck drivers, railways and public transport workers, bank employees, electricity workers, annadatas, police, firemen and the armed forces all had to go about their work as normal, but with the additional anxiety of the virus hanging over them. We recognize this, and I think I speak on behalf of everybody in this august house when I express my heartfelt gratitude to these men and women for how they were able to carry out their work and duty to provide for the nation's basics over those crucial months. Speaker, sir, for public good, honorable members of parliament and members of legislative assemblies too offered their salaries. In May 2020, the government announced the Atmanirbhar Bharat package. To sustain the recovery further into the year, we also rolled out 2 more Atmanirbhar packages, 2 and 3. Total financial impact of all the Atmanirbhar Bharat packages, including measures taken by the RBI, was estimated to be about 27.1 lakh crores, which amounts to more than 13% of our GDP. As a government, we kept a watch on the situation and were proactive in our responses. The government, led by the Prime Minister, stretched its resources to deliver for most vulnerable sections of our society, the poorest of the poor, the Dalits, the tribals, the elderly, the migrants. The Atmanirbhar packages accelerate up cessation of public sector undertakings, one production-linked incentive schemes are some of the notable reforms carried out during this period. Faceless income tax assessment, DBT, and financial inclusion are the others. Today, India has 2 vaccines available and has begun medically safeguarding not only her own citizens against COVID-19, but also those of 100 or more countries. It is added comfort to know that 2 or more vaccines are also expected soon. Honorable Prime Minister launched the vaccination drive by crediting and thanking our scientists. We are ever grateful for the strength and rigor of their efforts. Having said that, we are all reminded time and again that our fight against COVID-19 continues into 2021. Now, just as it happened after the 2 world wars, there are signs that the political, economic, and strategic relations in the post-COVID world are changing. This moment in history is the dawn of a new era, one in which India is well poised to truly be the land of promise and hope. I borrow the words of Rabindranath Tagore. Faith is the bird that feels the light and sings when the dawn is still dark. Faith is the bird that feels the light and sings when the dawn is still dark. In this spirit, I can't help but recall the joy that we as cricket-loving nation felt after the Team India's recent spectacular success in Australia. It has reminded us of all the qualities that we as a people, particularly our youth, epitomize of having abundant promise and the unsuppressed thirst to perform and to succeed. Today, data shows that India now has one of the 112 per million population and one of the lowest active cases of about 130. Laid the foundation to the revival we are seeing now in the economy. This budget will be the first of this new decade. This budget will also be a digital budget, and that has happened with all your support. So far, only 3 times has a budget followed a contraction in the economy. All such contractions earlier were as a result of situations typical to India. This time, the contraction in our economy is due to a global pandemic, just like in several other countries. Having said that, I want to confidently state that our government is fully prepared to support and facilitate the economy's reset. This budget provides every opportunity for our economy to raise and capture the pace that it needs for a sustainable growth. 2021 is the year of many important milestones for our history. I mention a few of these. It is the 75th year of independence, 60 years of Goa's accession to India, 50 years of the 1971 India-Pakistan War. It will be the year of the 8th census of independent India. It will also be India's turn at the BRICS presidency, the year for our Chandrayaan-3 mission, and the Haridwar Mahakumbh. Honorable Speaker, before I commence Part A of the budget, I want to take a moment to acknowledge how isolating and distancing seemed like insurmountable challenges for a country like ours that has people coming together in times of crisis. It hurts us in many ways. It hurt us in many ways. I bow my head in respect to every citizen for the endurance shown in facing what was an undeniably a tough year for all our physical and mental well-being. Part A. In Part A, I wish to lay a vision for Atmanirbhar Bharat. Atmanirbhar Bharat or Atmanirbharta is not a new idea. Ancient India was largely self-reliant and equally a business epicenter of the world. Atmanirbhar Bharat is an expression of the 130 crore Indians who have full confidence in their capabilities and skills. We are already part of international groupings such as the G20 and the BRICS, the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, and the International Solar Alliance are realities today due to India's efforts. The proposals in Part A will further strengthen the Sankalp of Nation First, doubling farmers' income, strong infrastructure, healthy India, good governance, opportunities for youth, education for all, women empowerment, and inclusive development, among others. Additionally, also on the path to fast implementation are the 13 promises we had made in the budget of 2015-16, which were to materialize during the Amrit Mahotsav of 2022 on the 75th year of our independence. They too resonate with the vision of Atmanirbharta. The budget proposals for 21-22 rest on 6 pillars: health and well-being, physical and financial capital and infrastructure, inclusive development for aspirational India, reinvigorating human capital, innovation and R&D, and as 6th, minimum government and maximum governance. I now move to talking about the first pillar, health and well-being. Even at the outset, I would like to say that the investment on health infrastructure in this budget has increased substantially. Progressively, as institutions absorb more, we shall commit more. Taking a holistic approach to health, we focus on strengthening 3 areas: preventive, curative, and well-being. Health systems. A new centrally sponsored scheme, PM Atmanirbhar Swasth Bharat Yojana, will be launched with an outlay of about 64,180 crores over 6 years. This will develop capacities of primary, secondary, and tertiary care health systems, strengthen existing national institutions, and create new institutions to cater to detection and cure of new and emerging diseases. This will be in addition to the National Health Mission. The main interventions under the scheme are support for over 17,000 rural and 11,000 urban health and wellness centers, setting up integrated public health labs in all districts, and 3,382 block public health units in 11 states, establishing critical care hospital blocks in 602 districts and 12 central institutions, strengthening of National Center for Disease Control, its 5 regional branches and 20 metropolitan health surveillance units, expansion of the integrated health information portal to all states and UTs to connect all public health labs, operationalization of 17 new public health units, and strengthening of 33 existing public health units at points of entry, that is, at 32 airports, 11 seaports, and 7 land crossings, setting up of 15 health emergency operations centers and 2 mobile hospitals, and setting up of a National Institution for One Health, a regional research platform for WHO, World Health Organization, Southeast Asia Region Office, 9 biosafety level 3 laboratories, and 4 regional national institutes for virology. Nutrition. To strengthen nutritional content, delivery, outreach, and outcome, we will merge the supplementary nutrition program and the Poshan Abhiyan and launch the Mission Poshan 2.0. We shall adopt an intensified strategy to improve nutritional outcomes across 112 aspirational districts. Universal coverage of water supply. The World Health Organization has repeatedly stressed the importance of clean water, sanitation, and clean environment as a prerequisite to achieving universal health. The Jal Jeevan Mission Urban will be launched. It aims at universal water supply in all 4,378 urban local bodies with 2.86 crores household tap connections, as well as liquid waste management in 500 Amrit cities. It will be implemented over 5 years with an outlay of 2,87,000 crores. Swachh Bharat and Swasth Bharat. For further Swachhata of urban India, we intend to focus on complete fecal sludge management and wastewater treatment, source segregation of garbage, reduction in single-use plastic, reduction in air pollution by effectively managing waste from construction and demolition activities, and bioremediation of all legacy dump sites. The Urban Swachh Bharat Mission 2.0 will be implemented with a total financial allocation of 1,41,678 crores over a period of 5 years from 2021. Clean air. To tackle the burgeoning problem of air pollution, I propose to provide an amount of 2,217 crores of rupees for 42 urban centers with a million-plus population in this budget. Scrapping policy. We are separately announcing, Honorable Speaker, scrapping policy to phase out old and unfit vehicles. This will help in encouraging fuel-efficient, environment-friendly vehicles, thereby reducing vehicular pollution and oil import bills. Vehicles would undergo fitness tests in automated fitness centers after 20 years in case of personal vehicles and after 15 years in case of commercial vehicles. Details of the scheme will be separately shared by the ministry. Vaccines. The pneumococcal vaccine, a made-in-India product, is presently limited to only 5 states. It will be rolled out across the country. This will avert more than 50,000 child deaths annually. Honorable Speaker, I have provided 35,000 crores of rupees for COVID-19 vaccines in this year 21-22. I am committed to provide further funds if required. So the budget outlay for health and well-being is 2,23,000 in this BE 21-22, as against the BE of only 94,452 crores, and it marks an increase of 137%. The details of the same are at Annexure 1 of the speech. Honorable Speaker, I now move to the second pillar, physical and financial capital and infrastructure. Atmanirbhar Bharat, production-linked incentive schemes are things which I would like to place an emphasis. For a $5 trillion economy, our manufacturing sector has to grow in double digits on a sustained basis. Our manufacturing companies need to become an integral part of global supply chains, possess core competence and cutting-edge technology. To achieve all of the above, PLI schemes to create manufacturing global champions for an Atmanirbhar Bharat have been announced for 13 sectors. For this, the government has committed nearly 1.97 lakh crores over 5 years starting this financial year. This initiative will help bring scale and size in key sectors, create and nurture global champions, and provide jobs to our youth. Textiles. To enable the textile industry to become globally competitive, attract large investments, and boost employment generation, a scheme of Mega Investment Textiles Park will be launched in addition to the PLI schemes. This will create world-class infrastructure with plug-and-play facilities to create global champions in exports. 7 textile parks will be established over 3 years. Infrastructure. The National Infrastructure Pipeline, which I announced in December 2019, is the first of its kind. Whole of government exercise ever undertaken by Government of India. The NIP was launched with 6,835 projects. The project pipeline has now expanded to 7,400 projects. Around 217 projects worth rupees 1.10 lakh crores under some key infrastructure ministries have been completed. The NIP is a specific target which this government is committed to achieving over the coming years. It will require a major increase in funding from both the government and the financial sector. In this budget, I propose to take concrete steps to do this in 3 ways. Firstly, by creating the institutional structures. Secondly, by a big thrust on monetizing assets. And thirdly, by enhancing the share of capital expenditure in central and state budgets. Infrastructure needs long-term debt financing. A professionally managed development financial institution is necessary to act as a provider, enabler, and catalyst for infrastructure financing. Accordingly, I shall introduce a bill to set up a development financial institution. I have provided a sum of 20,000 crore rupees to capitalize this institution. The ambition is to have a lending portfolio of at least 5 lakh crores for this DFI within 3 years' time. Debt financing of InvITs and REITs by foreign portfolio investors will be enabled by making suitable amendments in the relevant legislations. This will further ease access of finance to InvITs and REITs, thus augmenting funds for infrastructure and real estate sectors. Asset monetization. Monetizing operating public infrastructure. Monetizing operating public infrastructure assets is a very important financing option for new infrastructure construction. A national monetization pipeline of potential brownfield infrastructure assets will be launched. An asset monetization dashboard will also be created for tracking the progress and to provide visibility to investors. Some important measures in the direction of monetization are National Highways Authority of India and the PGCIL each have sponsored one InvIT that will attract international and institutional investors. 5 operational roads with an estimated enterprise value of 5,000 crores of rupees are being transferred to the NHAI in WIT. Similarly, transmission assets of value 7,000 crores will be transferred to the PGCIL in WIT. Railways will monetize dedicated freight corridor assets for operations and maintenance after commissioning. The next lot of airports will be monetized for operations and management concessions. Other core infrastructure assets that will be rolled out under the asset monetization programs are NHAI operational toll roads, 2 transmission assets of PGCL, 3 oil and gas pipelines of GAIL, Gas Authority of India Limited, IOCL and HPCL, Airports Authority of India airports in Tier 2 and 3 cities, other railway infrastructure assets, warehousing assets of CPSE, such as the Central Warehousing Corporation and NAFED, among others, and sports stadiums. Sharp increase in capital budget. In the BE 2020-21, we had provided for 4.12 lakh crores for capital expenditure. It was our effort that in spite of resource crunch, we should spend more on capital, and we are likely to end this year at around 4.39 lakh crores, which I have provided in the RE of 2020-2021. For 21-22, I propose a sharp increase in capital expenditure and thus have provided 5 more than the BE of 2020-2021. Of this, I have kept a sum of more than 44,000 crores in the budget head of the Department of Economic Affairs to be provided for projects, programs, or departments that show good progress in capital expenditure and are in need of further funds. Over and above this expenditure, we would also be providing more than 2 lakh crores to states and autonomous bodies for their capital expenditure. We will also work out specific mechanisms to nudge states to spend more of their budget on creation of infrastructure. Roads and highways infrastructure. More than 13,000 kilometer length of roads at a cost of 3.3 lakh crores has already been awarded under the 5.35 lakh crores Bharatmala Pariyojana project, of which 3,800 kilometers have been constructed. By March 2022, we would be awarding another 8,500 kilometers and complete an additional 11,000 kilometers of national highway corridors. To further augment road infrastructure, more economic corridors are also being planned. Some are 3,500 kilometers of national highway works in the state of Tamil Nadu at an investment of 1.03 lakh crores. These include Madurai-Kollam corridor, Chittoor-Tachur corridor, and construction will start next year. Second, 1,100 kilometers of national highway works in the state of Kerala at an investment of 65,000 crores, including 600 kilometer section of Mumbai-Kanyakumari corridor in Kerala. Third, 675 kilometers of highway works in the state of West Bengal at a cost of 25,000 crores, including upgradation of existing road Kolkata-Siliguri. National highway works of around 19,000 crores are currently in progress in the state of Assam. Further works of more than 34,000 crores covering more than 1,300 kilometers of national highways will be undertaken in the state in the coming 3 years. Some of the flagship corridors and other important projects that would see considerable activity in 2021-22 are in Annexure 2 to my speech. I am also providing an enhanced outlay of 1,18,101 crores, 1,18,101 crores for Ministry of Road Transport and Highways, of which 1,08,230 crores is for capital, the highest ever provided. Railway infrastructure. Honorable Speaker, sir, Indian Railways have prepared a National Rail Plan for India 2030. The plan is to create a future-ready railway system by 2030. Bringing down the logistic costs for an industry is at the core of our strategy to enable Make in India. It is expected that Western Dedicated Freight Corridor and Eastern Dedicated Freight Corridor will be commissioned by June 2022. The following additional initiatives are also proposed. The Sonnagar-Gomo sections, 263 kilometers of Eastern Dedicated Freight Corridor, will be taken up in PPP mode in this year itself. Gomo-Dankuni section of 274.3 kilometers will be also taken up shortly in short succession. We will undertake future dedicated freight corridor projects, namely East Coast Corridor from Kharagpur to Vijayawada, East-West Corridor from Bhusaval to Kharagpur to Dankuni, and North-South Corridor from Itarsi to Vijayawada. Detailed project reports will be undertaken in the first phase. Broad gauge route kilometers, RKM as I referred to, electrified is expected to reach 46,000 kilometers, 46,000 RKM. That is 72% by end of 2021 from 41,548 RKMs on 1st October 2020. 100% electrification of broad gauge routes will be completed by December 2023. For passenger convenience and safety, the following measures are being proposed. We will introduce the aesthetically designed Vista Dome LHB coach on tourist routes to give better travel experience to passengers. The safety measures undertaken in the past few years have borne results. To further strengthen this effort, high-density network and highly utilized network routes of Indian Railways will be provided with an indigenously developed automatic train protection system that eliminates train collision due to human error. I am providing a record sum of 1,10,055 crores for railways, of which 1,07,100 crores is for capital expenditure only. Urban infrastructure. We will work towards raising the share of public transport in urban areas through expansion of metro rail networks and augmentation of city bus services. A new scheme will be launched at a cost of 18,000 crores to support augmentation of public bus transport services. The scheme will facilitate deployment of innovative PPP models to enable private sector players to finance, to acquire, to operate, and to maintain over 20,000 buses. The scheme will boost the automobile sector, provide fillip to economic growth, create employment opportunities for our youth, and enhance ease of mobility for urban residents. A total of 702 kilometers of conventional metro is operational, and another 1,016 kilometers of metro and RRTS is under construction in 27 cities. 2 new technologies, that is Metro Light and Metro Neo, will be deployed to provide metro rail systems at much lesser cost with same experience, convenience and safety in Tier 2 cities and peripheral areas of Tier 1 cities also. Central counterpart funding will be provided to Kochi Metro Railway Phase 2 of 11.5 kilometer at a cost of 1,957.05 crores. Chennai Metro Railway Phase 2 of 118.9 kilometers at a cost of 63,246 crores. Bengaluru Metro Railway Project Phase 2A and 2B of 58.19 kilometers at a cost of 14,788 crores. Nagpur Metro Rail Project Phase 2 and Nashik Metro at a cost of 5,976 crores and 2,092 crores respectively. Power infrastructure. The past 6 years have seen a number of reforms and achievements in power sector. We have added 139 gigawatts of installed capacity, connected an additional 2.8 crore households, and added 1.41 lakh circuit kilometers of transmission lines. The distribution companies across the country are monopolies, either government or private. There is a need to provide choice to the consumers by promoting competition. A framework will be put in place to give consumers alternatives to choose from. Again, a framework will be put in place to give consumers alternatives to choose from among 3,05,984 crores over 5 years. The scheme will provide financial improvements. Speaking at the 3rd Reinvestment Conference in November to launch a comprehensive national hydrogen energy mission. It is now proposed to launch shipping and waterways. Major ports will be moving from managing their operational services on their own to a model where a private partner will manage it for them. Will be offered by the major ports on private-public partnership mode. Tenders floated by ministries and CPSCs. An amount of 1,600 greater training and employment opportunities for Indian seafarers, besides enhancing international convention. Around 90 ship recycling yards at Allah will be made to bring more ships to India from Europe and Japan. Recycling capacities of a right displacement ton (LDT) will be doubled by 2024. This is expected to generate an additional 1.5 petroleum and natural gas lockdown period. Taking note of the crucial, we will add 100 more districts in the next 3 years to the city. Will be set up for facilitation and coordination of booking of common all natural gas pipelines on a non-discriminatory open access basis. Contracts Regulation Act 1956 and Government Securities Act 2007 into a rationalized class fintech hub at the GIFT IFSC. To really enhance secondary market liquidity, it is proposed to create a permanent institutional framework. The proposed debt securities, both in the stressed and normal times, and help in the development of the bond market. Regulator and Warehousing Development and Regulatory Authority will be strengthened to set up a commodity market ecosystem arrangement, including vaulting, assaying to warehousing. Towards investor protection, I propose to introduce an investor charter for non-conventional energy sector. I propose to provide additional capital infusion of 1,000 crores, the Insurance Act 1938, to increase the permissible FDI limit from 49% to 74% in insurance companies and control with safeguards. Under the new structure, the majority of directors on the board being retained as general reserve. Stressed asset resolution to clean up the bank books. An asset reconstruction company limited, an asset management and dispose of the assets to alternative investment funds and other potential investors for eventual value realization of PSBs, further recapitalization of 20,000 crores is proposed in 21-22. Deposit insurance, easy and time-bound access to their deposits. To the extent of the deposit insurance, improve credit discipline while continuing to protect the interests of small borrowers. For NBFCs, 20 lakhs. Company matters. The decriminal compoundable offences under Companies Act 2013 is now complete. I now propose to take up decriminalization of the limited liability. I propose to revise the definition under the Companies Act exceeding 50 lakh to not exceeding 2 crores. And turnover from not exceeding 2 crores to not exceeding 20 crores. This will make us operation of one-person companies and turnover, allowing their conversion into any other type of company at any time from 182 days to 120 days, and allow also non-resident Indians to incorporate OPCs in India. This will be a big boost for ensure faster resolution of cases. The NCLT framework will be strengthened. E-court systeming driven MCA 2.1 version to MCA 21.0 will have additional modules for e-scrutiny, e-adjudication, in spite of COVID-19, we have kept working towards strategic Earth Movers Limited, Pavan Hans, Neelachal Ispat Nigam Limited, among others, would be. Other than IDBI Bank, we propose to take up the two public sector in itself. Third policy. The policy provides a clear roadmap for disinvestment in all non-strategic, maintained, and rest privatized. In the remaining sectors of all CPSEs will be forward the disinvestment policy. I'm asking NITI to work on the next list of centre public sector